this week's History on the Edge. I'm very happy to introduce the speaker of today, Gwenaëlle Bauvois, who is a sociologist working currently at the University of Helsinki on far-right extremism, and she is also a part of the project Arenas, which our institute is also involved in. And today she will speak about a topic I'm personally very interested in, which is conspiracy talk in ordinary people's everyday experiences. And the stage is yours.
Thank you so much. And of course, I want to thank the Institute for inviting me. It's a great opportunity to be here today and being able to talk a little bit about one of the studies that I've been conducting with some of my colleagues that are related also to the theme of our Arenas project. The acronym stands for Analysis of and Responses to Extremist Narratives in Europe. But today we will be talking about the United States, but we can, of course, make the link also with Europe. So very happy to be here today. So during the let's say, the past 3 decades, exposure to conspiracy culture has become increasingly embedded in the everyday lived experiences for a lot of ordinary people, regardless if they support or believe in conspiracy theories or not. Mainstream audiences at large have gradually become more accustomed to being exposed to conspiracy theories. And of course, the familiarity has been facilitated by conspiracy theories circulating in pop culture. We can think of like TV series like the X-Files or the movie franchise, the Matrix. And more recently, of course, through the exposure to mainstream media coverage of politicians using conspiracies in their mobilization rhetoric. Of course, we can think about the Trump administration #1 and #2, and of course, in many European countries, as we know very well. But so far, research on conspiracies have been really focusing more on dedicated conspiratory microcosms. But actually focusing on people who are knowledgeable about conspiracy theories because they consume conspiratory content or because they support politicians who make use of conspiracy theories will inform us very little about how conspiracy culture is encountered and experienced by ordinary people, especially by those who may actively avoid engaging with it. And as such, we are still lacking a grounding understanding of how ordinary people experience and relate to conspiracy culture in their everyday lives. So to grab the phenomena of mainstream conspiracy culture, we cannot rely only on studies of the mosaic of conspirational subcultures, mostly online. We must also examine how these narratives find their way into a wider public imaginary. And one way to approach and understand conspiracy culture would be to study how ordinary people talk about conspiracy theories in their everyday lives. And in our study, we propose to examine conspiracy culture by looking at if and how ordinary people engage in conspiracy talk in a confidential setting where they are asked about politics, media use, health, work, personal relationship, but never about conspiracy theories. So that was the premise of our study. And on this basis, we try to answer this research question. How commonly do ordinary people spontaneously mention conspiracy theories when talking about their everyday lives? And what kind of tangible impact conspiracy theories have in the daily lives of ordinary people? And to what extent does ordinary people's conspiracy talk challenge the way in which conspiracy culture is presented in more mediatized and politicized public settings? So to do so, as I said, we analyze conspiracy talk that emerges unprompted, which is very different from what had been done before. And I will tell you in a short moment about the data itself, how we managed to get our hands on data where we could have access to this unprompted conspiracy talk. But let's spend a few minutes to define the concept of conspiracy talk as we use it in our study. So conspiracy talk is a quite evocative expression that can be used to denote a wide range of practices and in academic discourse, but also in lay discourses. So for instance, journalists can be using the term conspiracy talk, and it's often used in the same way with expression like conspiracy theorizing, spreading disinformation, conspiracy discourses, conspiracy mentality. So they use in an interchangeable way all these terms, though they can mean something a little bit different. But in academic scholarship, the concept has been used in many different ways and often in a rather loose manner. So researchers addressing conspiracy talk tend to focus first on people who express support for conspiracy theories, or on people selected to be interviewed or surveyed on the basis of their belief, their potential belief in conspiracy theories. And this study often exclude the more private and intimate context where people may find themselves discussing conspiracy theories, sometimes without seeking, and sometimes even despite their attempts at avoiding the topic. Of course, it makes a lot of sense to look at conspiracy theory-related discussion online, because that's the way we often picture this discussion to happen in dedicated online groups, because it is often where conspiracy talk commonly manifests itself. But overlooking the mundane and private social context where conspiracy theories are being discussed runs the risk of misidentifying or simply missing many of the less elaborated, less consistent, and more ambiguous articulation of the conspiracy talk. So it is for the mitigation of this risk that we insist on employing a more ended definition of the concept of conspiracy talk. No, that's the wrong way. So the way we use it in our study, so conspiracy talk is a talk that does not denote talk specifically endorsing conspiracy theory, but instead points to the social practice of collective sense-making, where conspiracy theories are heard and told, and hearing and telling are things done with other peoples and in group. So it's not only about people who believe in conspiracies talking about conspiracies, but it's also when this kind of discussion arises in different contexts, whether you are believing in conspiracies or not. I know it might be a little bit complex, but maybe it gets a bit clearer when I talk about the data. So, of course, for operationalize this concept for empirical analysis, we needed to have access to suitable data, where ordinary people address the role and impact of conspiracy in their everyday life in a more private setting, ideally without being prompted to do so. Of course, we understand that this kind of data is not easy to come by or to compile, but we were lucky enough to get our hands on very rich data. So we try to address this lacuna in the research field by analyzing. Am I again putting in the wrong direction? Yes. So we analyze live discourses, interviews of ordinary people. So, and where this data is coming from? It consists of interviews that were conducted by the American Voices Project, which is a joint initiative between Stanford and Princeton University, where they conducted 5,000 interviews in total, so really large data. And the idea was to assess a broad range of social and economic attitudes and behavior with a nationally representative sample consisting of 300 communities in the United States. So we understand it's something that was like really large, and they really went everywhere to try to interview people and have a representative sample of the American people, so to speak. And it is a blend of qualitative, survey, administrative, and experimental approaches to collect this data. And we were lucky enough to be invited by Stanford University with my colleague, Nico Pyronen, Anton Berry, and Peter Hawley, to analyze in situ the data, because for security reasons, the data couldn't be accessed remotely, so we had to physically go to Stanford and use their own like internal like system. But we thought, okay, why not go to Stanford and dig into it? And no one had been looking into that. It was basically when we met that professor in Helsinki and we said, well, but did you find anything about conspiracy? He said, yeah, but we didn't ask anything about that and nobody looked into it. And then we thought, okay, that would be super interesting actually. And that's how it happened. So the interviewees were asked nothing about conspiracy theories, but we were interested to find out if any conspiracy talk was visible in the data, and to locate and identify the conspiracy talk passages in the transcript, we used a mixed method approach, incorporating an iterative series of computational and manual steps. So I will briefly, I don't want to spend too much time, but just to explain you briefly how we operationalize the data for analysis. And as you can see, our analysis is based on a data set of 1,613 interviews that were the interview transcribed at the time that we could computationally analyze. So first, with the four of us, we compiled, I'll try to push the right button this time. Yes. So we compiled a list of 191 keywords, conspiracy talk keyword list that was based on both published and ongoing research. And we use also the research from that researcher from University of Amsterdam, Mark Tutors, that have been collecting 28,000 conspiracy-related TikTok posts, and we use the top hashtags that were compiled by tutors. And then we, of course, added our own expertise on that. And on this 191 keywords, 74 pointed to this number of passages that you can see. So anyway, quite many could be spotted. And for instance, we had like Area 51, microchip, cabal, false flag, QAnon, reptilians, red pill. We had like a list of many keywords related to conspiracy. And in the second iteration, we matched the transcript with its keyword list. And we came up, as you can see, with 2,642 passages, which is a fair amount of data. And we did also some computational noise extraction. I will not go into that. But then we got together with the team of researchers for doing something a bit more manual. And we read through all the passages in which conspiracy talk keywords appeared. And it could be, for instance, I believed in UFOs, or I used to live right to a Masonic temple. So we'll be looking directly to the transcript to locate each passages containing this conspiracy talk. And we coded the passages as containing the conspiracy talk, and then we also annotated each passage with thematic code, basically to explain what the passages were about. Was it about media, relationship, the environment, politics, and so on? Because of course, we noticed that there was a wide range of themes within these passages. In addition, we also noticed that there was a distinct variance in the degree in which the interviewees express support or opposition towards the conspiracy theories mentioned. So we also I notated the passages with an orientation category. So supporting, so meaning that the people who clearly support conspiracy theories, then people who are challenging them, and also people who are just referencing to them without having a really strong, more in a non-committal manner. But enough about the technicalities, but I wanted to briefly explain, and I know some of you are expert in computational methods, and that's not my forte, I'm a qualitative, but this was a joint effort also with experts in computational method, because that was really the only way for us to be able to analyze such a large data set. But we, of course, wanted to have the close reading as well, since, like, most of us are qualitative researchers. So the big question is, did we find any conspiracy talk, and in which proportion? What would be your guess?
Of course.
Of course, yes, we found. What do you think would be the proportion? Considering they were not asked any questions about.
Considerable, I'd say more than a half.
Okay, interesting. Do you agree with her?
40%.
40%. Just okay. It's like it's going down all the time. So maybe no. Yeah, and it's of course keeping in mind that there were no questions about that. So it's what came spontaneously when people were asked, "Oh, what about the relationship with your neighbors?" Or like, "Do you have you had some health problems?" Or everything like that. So of course, the numbers are smaller than that. So the answer is yes, we did find. And actually, again, I hope I pushed others, like, we found 10% of the transcript in the data set containing conspiracy talk. So of course, you gave me much larger number, which I can understand. If you would be asking specific questions to people, then the numbers would be extremely much higher. But since we were expecting something around 10%. So, and of course, whether this is a big or small figure really depends on the angle of inquiry. So on the one hand, you have an array of reports and surveys that shows that Americans, but not only Americans, you found the same kind of numbers in France and other countries in Europe. They show that Americans believe in conspiracy theory is much higher than 10%. And as I said, we have similar content. So for instance, there was this report from 2022 by the Associated Press Center for Public Affairs from the University of Chicago. In this report, they were like showing that 48%, so this is based on a survey, 48% of all Americans believe overall that they are secretly being governed by an unknown group. 32% believe, and I put believe in italics because we will discuss about this idea of belief that maybe we need to step away from. Believe that much of our lives are being controlled by plots hatched in secret places, and 32% believe in the Great Replacement theory. So these are really high number, and already in 2014, Oliver and Wood were showing that at least 50% of Americans believe in at least one conspiracy. So you can see that these are high number, but our data offers a very different and unique viewpoint than these polls and these surveys, with very alarming high percentages. As our interviewees were never asked about conspiracy theory, let alone conspiracy beliefs. There were no questions about their beliefs. Indeed, what we collected and analyzed is only unprompted, and it's only what people took upon themselves to bring up. Might it be to support certain conspiracy theories, or mentioning them or opposing them in discussions only about their everyday lives. So why is it so much less frequent to engage in conspiracy talk than it is supposedly to believe in conspiracy theories? These kind of surveys and polls, they will commonly assess all kinds of conspiracy belief, including, for instance, event conspiracies. For instance, asking them, do you believe that there was something fishy about JFK's assassination? So they will give like an example that is based on an event, a specific event, and that resonates, of course, in people's mind. Also from a historical point of view, because it's embedded also in a popular culture, that you have this like events like assassinations of president and of like mysterious death of movie star like Marilyn Monroe and things like that. Then you have systemic conspiracies that are focusing more on alleged machination of Jewish people or from the Freemasons. So again, like really showing that there would be some kind of system working in the shadow. And then they also have the category of super conspiracies that are led by all-powerful evil entities who are able to control everything happening. So for instance, the conspiracy theory of the deep state, for instance. So they are like asking, they are trying to assess so many different kinds of conspiracy belief. And of course, what happens based on a survey, that if they say that a person believes in at least one conspiracy, what does it mean that they believe in at least one conspiracy? It can mean, for instance, that somebody might be inclined to think that there might have been somebody behind the assassination of JFK, just wondering that, yeah, maybe it was just not one single person, but that person who believes in one conspiracy or more can also be a person that is 100% convinced that there is a secret cabal distributing children's blood to elite controlling the world. So you have very different kind of category that are like included in this 50% that believe in at least one conspiracy. So you cannot really lump together all these different set of beliefs. So all this points to the conclusion that assessing people's conspirational beliefs, when you try to do that, it's not possible to estimate the role and the significance of conspiracy theories in their everyday life, because it's very much removed from their everyday life. And on the contrary, by including only people who spontaneously mention conspiracy theories when asked what things are important in their life, it allows us to assess this aspect. So in that way, so while the engagement in conspiracy talk in the context of these interviews appear to be much less common than on the population level surveys, it is nevertheless quite striking that 10% of the respondents in a body representative of ordinary Americans would spontaneously bring up conspiracy theories as an element that is worthy enough to be mentioned in response to question prompts on other topics concerning their everyday life. So if we look at it from this point of view, then we notice that this 10% is actually quite a lot. And of course, it would have been nearly impossible to think that we would get something like 80%, because if people would be bringing this up, that would be really much of a concern. So in that way, we understand that it is something that anyway is worth talking about, and that people think it's worthy to bring up when talking about their health, about their family relationship, about their working conditions and things like that. So let's see what we found in these interviews, what people were really like bringing up when having this discussion about their life. And among one of the first things that we noticed during the manual close reading of the transcript is that surprisingly many passages did not appear to express support, endorsement, or belief in conspiracy theory. So we noticed that it wasn't so black and white, and that people would bring it up for different reasons. And it's not that everybody who brought up conspiracy theories was not because they were hardcore believers in them, but still it didn't mean that it was not significant in their life, in their experiences. So that's why we operationalized three orientation of conspiracy talk that I mentioned briefly already. So that you have the supporting, the challenging, and the referencing. And you can see that supporting and challenging are very much in the same ballpark, which was, of course, interesting, and I will go into that a little bit more. So many interviewees engaging in conspiracy talk explicitly state that they agree with explanation, sentiments, and political implication incorporated in the conspiracy theory discussed. So I have like some example, for example, somebody that is supporting, say, for instance, we have an election where fraud was proven, not just assumed, not just meme on Facebook. It was actually proven over and over and over again. And he's talking about the voting machine and the fraudulent ballots, so all the voter fraud conspiracy that has been like used by Trump since 2017, 16. And it was proven, and they just shut their eyes. So you found like a really classical articulation of conspiracy talk, like in the case of the voter fraud. And on the other hand, it is as common for the interview to explicitly criticize the conspiracy theories they brought up based on things such as its truth value, its perceived political outcome, or personal experiences concerning the topic. So one example, for instance, so through social media and the internet, people can come up with really weird conspiracy theories, and people can create them and find some followers, and our education system has not been able or structured to teach them how to critically analyze all these bits of information. So it's very depressing to me, because I think it is a cycle that I don't know how we can break it. So there are a lot of persons that were actually expressing worries about the circulation of all this conspirational content, that people are not able to make the difference between what is true and what is not true. And there was also like a remaining part, and it was like a bit confusing in the beginning, that we noticed that people brought it up, but not really in a committal manner. They were like engaging in referencing conspiracy talk to describe what they have encountered without expressing neither support or critique, with some even explicitly recognizing the ambivalence of this position. And I think this is a good quote. So the interviewer is asking, yeah, how has the COVID been for you, your family, your friends? How it has been for them? I don't know, they have mixed stories. Some of them think it's a conspiracy. Some of them think it's that the government is looking out for us. And I personally don't really have an opinion on it. I kind of feel both. And the person is laughing. So that the person is hearing all these things, and it's coming from different directions, and some of his family members and friends and neighbors are saying it's a hoax, it's a conspiracy, and some are saying that actually we are being protected from this disease, and people don't really know how to position themselves, which can create, of course, a lot of confusion. So that's why we noticed that it wasn't just about, okay, these people are just talking about conspiracies because they believe in them. And what has been discussed then in this different oriented conspiracy talk? So I have a table that we don't have to go through everything, but just to show you that we had all these different thematic distribution, because we noticed why people are actually talking about very different things. And it was interesting to see what they are talking the most when they are bringing up conspiracies. And the main themes are politics, COVID-19, media, health, and relationships. So of course, to mention that part of the interviews were collected during the COVID time. So of course, the topics around COVID were of course interesting at the time, but we can see that, yeah, politics, media, health, and it was quite interesting to see also that relationship was also brought up quite a lot. So we can observe in this simple table that there is a significant divergence in how the interviewees engage with thematic subject matter in conspiracy talk, depending on whether they challenge, refer, or support conspiracy theory. So I won't go through all of them, but I will talk about the political arenas in media and then the health and relationship. So the political arenas and the media are, of course, the most polarizing themes. That's quite obvious. So we can see that it's mostly people supporting and challenging that are on the top. And the supporters often do not have a very concrete understanding of what the alleged conspiracy is about. They are saying that something is out there and something is controlling us. It's not very clear what's going on. And you have like a supporter saying, Trump built that wall because they are planning on doing something to us over there. People better open up their eyes and realize it's that the idea, open your eyes, something is going on. You need to wake up to the situation. I will not read all of that. And then you have also, and then the guy finishes by saying, and I believe also in the Illuminati. So quite a clear conspirational positioning. We had like some interesting references to the Illuminati and Freemasons in the data, and like Satanism and pedophile priests, and like a lot of interesting themes that came up. And somebody would be challenged, would be saying like, it's really easy to flood the airways with false information that people take as gospel. And I feel that most Americans are underinformed, and they don't read the news, they don't listen to the news, they don't watch the news. Some do, but I feel, that people I work with, some don't even vote. So we can see that they lament about the lack of awareness among the fellow citizen. So while the supporters commonly hold that the sheepholes uninformed condition is due to the brainwashing by a political and a media elite, the challengers will present the belief in conspiracy theories as resulting from a low media literacy or outright refusal to follow news coverage. And of course, as I said, we know that the COVID period brought a lot of conspiracy theories and conspiracy-related discussion into the public debate. So one could expect that talk supporting conspiracies would increase during the pandemic time, and we could see that it did. During the pandemic, frequency supporting conspiracy talk doubled. So that's not totally a surprise. So, and you could find in this supporting orientation classical anti-vax conspirational tropes. Well, I think it's a big conspiracy. God only knows what there is in the vaccine. They haven't developed any kind of test, and it was developed so quickly. So like the classical tropes that you could find. And always the argument, they haven't found a vaccine for cancer, so how come they found a vaccine for so quickly, etc. As we know, cancer can be cured by it. But anyway, so very easy to spot this kind of anti-vax conspirational tropes. And again, like saying what there is inside the vaccine, that people sometimes say that it would cause autism, and it was something that we found quite a lot in the data. But what was really, so it was not like a huge surprise to think, okay, we are going to find more pro-conspiracy thinking during the COVID time. That didn't come as a surprise. But what was really interesting is actually that the challenging conspiracy talk increased by 5 after the COVID came along. So that was a surprise. So this finding is important because it indicates that the overall increase in engagement in conspiracy talk during the pandemic time was mostly due to the increase in conspiracy talk that specifically challenges conspiracy theories, proliferating, if I'm able to say it, during the pandemic. You could think like that they are like underlying the deleterious social impact of anti-vax and related conspirational ideation. It's like, where is your brain? Hundreds of thousands of people are dying and you think it's a hoax and it's just the stupidity that annoys me. I don't do all stupid. I just don't, anybody thinks it's a hoax and the government is trying to control them. I just hope their stupidity doesn't have them catch COVID. So it was like really interesting to see that a lot of people were bringing it up because it actually made them really helpless and really angry and very anxious about the situation. And it's something that really impacted their life and also impacted their relationships with people around them. And that's the next point, that also the theme about relationship is probably the least politically controversial theme, but still very interesting because polls and surveys on conspiracy-minded communities rarely touch upon the impact of conspiracy on people's life in terms of relationships. And in some cases, it can be presented as quite harmless and something silly to joke about. So for instance, me and my uncle make fun of my grandma because she has these conspiracy theories and they are outrageous. They control the weather and they say, yeah, okay, grandma. And they say like, how much tinfoil do you have in the house, grandma? So they're making fun out of her and say, she's a sweet lady, I wouldn't trade it for nothing. But at the same time, many will bring up the conspiracy theories in their talk to discuss the unease that they feel about conspiracy theories finding their way into close relationship with family, neighbors, and friends. So for instance, one example of somebody who had very nice neighbors and they say they were really good neighbors, good friends. We had breakfast on out Saturday mornings. We knew we had different views and so on. And then at some point, they commented that they thought that the whole thing was a hoax, and the guy was really speechless, and I didn't know how to respond, and we continued our friendship but didn't really know how to position himself. So it is like a way for these interviewees to express worries over how conspiracy talk may negatively impact their relationship, how helpless they feel when faced with unexpected conspirational talk. And there were people saying that basically they've lost friends, didn't talk with their brothers or sisters anymore because they were thinking that that the COVID was a hoax and they didn't want to get vaccinated. And then so it really brought a lot of chaos within family, groups of friends, relationship with neighbors, with colleagues, and so on. So this impact is something that I think is really important to keep an eye on, because it's something that is not being analyzed so much in other type of research. And my time is almost up, but it's good because I'm like moving on to the concluding remarks now. So we have a bit time to discuss. So to conclude this already long presentation, you understand it's quite difficult to try to summarize the whole study in 40 minutes. I try to give you some elements that I thought would be like interesting. And this research is probably among the first to study everyday encounters with conspiracy culture using nationally representative interview data. It is something that hasn't been really done. And the breadth and the scale of this data set consisting of, I forgot to put the slide. So consisting of 40 million words across over 1,600 live course interview is of course gives us an insight into people's life that we haven't had the possibility to have before with other type of data. And as I explained before, many polls and surveys indicate that over 2/3 of Americans believe in one or more conspiracies, but our findings suggest that many who do not support conspiracy theories still engage in conspiracy talk when asked about important things in their life. So rather than believe or even support, most of the conspiracy talk addresses the behavior and social practices linked to exposure to conspiracy culture. And many of the interviewees feel that they cannot just decide whether to engage or not with conspiracy culture in their daily interaction with families, network of acquaintances, colleagues, workplace. It exposes them to such engagement and they find it hard to avoid. And this study points to the conclusion that conspiracy culture cannot be grasped only by focusing on conspiratory microcosms. We need to have another viewpoint because it has mainstreamed to the extent that it often forms an important part of lived experience, also for people who do not support conspiracy theories. And just one last point, I know I'm like 41 minutes, so and this conclusion is reinforced when comparing the prevalence of conspiracy talk before and after the COVID. While only 6% of the interviewees engaged in conspiracy talk before the pandemic, this frequency more than doubled in the interview conducted after the pandemic. So we know that it has really zipped into people's everyday life. So taken together, this finding illustrates that first, the increased coverage of conspiracy theories, of course, during the pandemic time, rendered conspiracy culture a much more tangible feature of people's everyday life. And it also shows that increased exposure to conspiracy culture may increase the critical orientation towards conspiracy theories. And of course, I will end by of course, pointing out some limitations that, of course, the emergence of the COVID-19 in the middle of the interview period was a mixed blessing. On one hand, it was revealing how societal unrest accentuates everyday encounter with conspiracy culture, but at the same time, it makes it harder to distinguish pandemic-specific features of conspiracy talk with a more widely extrapolable observation. And of course, future research could address and expand upon this limitation by studying data from periods that have less significant social unrest, and also in context with lower level of polarization, political polarization than the United States. So of course, the goal would be to be able to extrapolate that to a context, a more European context, and maybe a context that would have a little bit less of this unrest. So really, these approaches will hopefully further contribute to a more nuanced understanding of how conspiracy talk finds its way from dedicated online spaces to a more permanent fixture in ordinary people's life. 42 minutes.
Perfect.
I'm good.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you a lot. Now it's time for the debate. I have an immediate question that's tied to your previous mention, so I'll jump in quickly and then open it up for the audience. So before you mentioned that during COVID, challenging conspiracy talk increased 5 times.
Yes.
But I'm curious if anyone made the calculation of how common that was, because we know that conspiracy talk appeared in 10% of the speeches, and how often did challenging conspiracy talk appear, because it also shows in a way preoccupation with conspiracy theories, but in a reverse way. So I would be curious to know how often that came up,
What exactly came up?
The
challenging,
yeah.
like you mean in the overall?
Yeah, either in the overall COVID, because I also think it shows a preoccupation with conspiracy theories, but in the other way then.
Yeah, I mean, in the overall data set, we could see, like if we take the before and after the COVID, that it was equally challenging and supporting. But after the COVID, there was an increase in both, but the increase was much more significant for the challenging orientation. I know there was a lot of information. So it was interesting because, of course, your first thought would be, of course, the interviews that were conducted during the COVID period, there would be more people bringing up their ideas about COVID being a hoax and so on. So it did appear, and we found a significant amount of talk that was like clearly conspirational. But at the same time, there was also a lot of this talk about people's concerns and worries and unease towards all these ideas that were brought up in their everyday life when talking with friends, colleagues, neighbors, and so on. And they did bring it up without being asked. So it is something that they really wanted to talk about as well. Of course, as I said, it was at the same time a blessing and a curse to have the COVID coming just in the middle. But at least it also, but I mean, it could be a totally different paper to really focus on looking so specifically about what could be the differences between and after. So we mentioned it in the article. The article is not published yet, but fingers crossed it's like in revision, and hopefully it will be published soon in the States. But of course there are some limitations, and we didn't for instance, look into really looking at the profile, because we also had access to all the information about the interviewees, where they come from, their age, their political background. It's so we try to look into it, but I mean, you can't fit everything in one article, so that could be something different. We really wanted to try to look at what people were talking about when talking about conspiracies, and trying to conceptualize the notion of conspiracy talk further, because it has, as I said, been a little bit vague and used in a bit of a impressionist manner. So we wanted to really offer some kind of frame to analyze this specific kind of talk.
Okay, thank you. Now, audience. Yes, Lilia?
Thank you very much for the presentation. Was really, really interesting. A lot of inputs.
Maybe too much. Yes, it's a lot to take in.
No, I have two questions. So the first that are also connected to my
of course.
research. I'm interested in how these conspiracy theories circulate in terms of media, but in terms also on how really people do get access to this kind of content. And I wanted to ask you if you found some clue about it, because as you mentioned before, they do not read that much newspapers, or they do not consume so many media-mediated information. So how do they come up with these conspiracy theories? And the second question is also because I saw that in one of the interview that you showed, there was a mention about social media and the role that they can play in disseminating this kind of content. And the second question is related to the table that you showed before about the team that you found related to conspiracy theories. And I of course, I looked on gender. So I noticed that there were no neutral reference to gender, to the theme of gender, but actually people are pro or cons this kind of conspiracy theories related on gender. And I wanted to ask you what kind of conspiracy theories you found related on gender and also on relationships, because I think that also relationships is in a way related to gender roles relationship, in a kind of a family traditional structures.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank
I
you.
don't know if it's too much.
I will try my best to answer. So about the access to conspiracies, did you mean in general or the people, the interviewees?
Yeah, about the people, but in general, of course, I'm interested, but especially in these interviews. if you
Yes.
found some,
Yeah, because of course, when people brought up conspiracy theories, they were of course often bringing up where they were coming from. And I would say that of course, either from people who support them or people who challenge them, social media is of course the place. But not only, of course, if somebody is more prone to believing or supporting conspiracy theories, they will probably look actively for this kind of content. Also, they would have been building that kind of bubble that would feed them that kind of content. But for people who don't actively seek for this kind of content, they will anyway be exposed to it through the social media content of some of their friends, family acquaintances, because you see that if they post something on their wall, you might see it even if you are not seeking that kind of content. And for instance, it might be, of course, if we are like talking about everyday life, it's also like just in discussion that, you know, people are talking with their neighbor and they had no idea that this person was into conspiracy theories, and it just comes as a surprise, and it can come up in all kinds of situation, or people just discussing the news and suddenly somebody brings up some kind of crazy theory, and people don't know how to respond. So they are exposed to it from different direction, and it's not only social media, because we often blame social media, but it's also through the discussion with people around you. Especially if you are in a period that is quite delicate, like it could be during the COVID, or it's a highly politically polarized situation, the time of elections, for instance, and this kind of discussion will bring up, and you have all these old conspiracies of the voter fraud coming up again and again. So people will be exposed to that whether they want it or not. Does that answer your first question?
Absolutely.
And I think you can agree with that.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. There are no actually data on how really people make these discourses circulating, because immediately we think that everything is mediated from social media.
Yeah, but
Actually, I think that the role the most important role is face-to-face communication.
yeah, and I think that's the whole point of this study, to show that it's not enough to just blame social media, or that it's only about groups of people online who support the conspiracy theories, to understand the impact they have in our lives as an overall. So we need to also consider, because I said it's also what people say, what people talk about, what people hear. That's how things circulate as well. It's not only in like online sphericals. And your question about gender, let's just say, did we find like gender-based conspiracy theories? Not so much, actually. Then again, it might deserve to be, again, we found different, like 17 different codes, themes, codes. So obviously we didn't have the possibility to dig very deep into all of them. Again, it could be also an article on its own to just look into that. But relationship, the way we coded relationship was more about like when people talk about their relationship in general, might it be, you know, a husband and wife, or relationship with their siblings, with their family at large, with their community, as they like to call it in the United States. It was more like when conspiracy theories start interfering with relationship, or even jeopardize relationship. And it might be sometime also between husband and wife. There were some example of interviewees when your set of values have become so divergent that in a way it makes it really difficult to be in a relationship. So we coded it more that way according to the passages that we identified. But definitely we would need, and we try to look also about the gender divide also between the female and male respondent. And we actually, because research has been showing that men are more prone to believe, again, in conspiracy theories, and we actually didn't find any kind of big difference between men and women. But then again, this would need to be like analyzed more in detail, maybe because this data is so rich, we could do so much with it. And there's been like already plenty of studies that have been published on this data where people have been looking, about racism, about health access and the working condition. And so, because they have collected so much that it's really a gold mine.
Any more?
Thank you for your presentation. I have just one to start at the beginning. And this is more methodological question. If we want to measure something, we need to have clear definition. Otherwise, we don't know what we are looking for. And what is your definition of the conspiracy theory? This is not something which is known to everybody.
Yeah.
It is very disputable term.
Of course, and I didn't include it in this presentation because I would have exceeded the time. But of course, in the paper, we do, of course, define what conspiracy theory is. If you want to hear it, I can briefly. So we have a definition. So for this study that analyzes how ordinary people engage with conspiracy, we define conspiracy theory as a narrative that, one, pertains to secret dealings between two or more entities, at least one of them human, so not to automatically include the whole range of religious myth and esoteria, a bit like we discussed at lunch. Two, seeks to explain one or more allegedly empirically observable phenomena, and three, arrives to an explanation that is widely not agreed upon by the conventional epistemic authority, such as free press and evidence-based institution of science and democratic governance. So that is our definition, because of course, I said I didn't want to go too much into detail because you're right. I mean, it's a term that is disputed. It's the same when you try to, for instance, define populism. I mean, it's like you have so many definitions. So, of course, in this paper, we do have this definition I just read you. That could be disputed by other researchers as well, but I think at least that's the one that we bring up, and we'll see. So far, it seems to be accepted, but I think our contribution for this study and this paper was more about trying to conceptualize the notion of conspiracy talk, because we wanted to really focus on that element of conspiracy theorizing. So if that answers your question.
Oliver?
So if I understand correctly, considering the third attribute which you mentioned in the definition of conspiracy theory, when defining or selecting the corpus of conspiracy theories, you generally stuck to the more fringe things like reptilians, QAnon, and so forth, and you consciously avoided, let's say, theories that could be considered ambivalent or are not maybe quite as obviously empirically disprovable. Because I imagine that would have made things quite complicated.
Yeah. And of course, it was complicated, and we had to make some decision, because sometimes we were in front of a passage and we were like thinking, is that really conspiracy talk or not? And that's why at the beginning we thought, well, we would be just finding conspiracy talk that would be like, of course, the one that would be supporting. And then we noticed it's actually much more nuanced, and a lot of things might be in a gray area. That's why we had this definition with these three levels, so we could use that definition in order to categorize what was the conspiracy talk as we use it in this study. But of course, it took a lot of work, and as I said, like, this is what we offer, and some people might agree, some people might disagree, as as always, but trying to bring a little bit different perspective. But sometimes, yeah, as you say, if it's like obvious, there were some obvious cases and people think that, yeah, actually there is another planet, or I believe that the United States is governed by the Illuminati or the reptilians. Like, this is quite a clear case, but sometimes when people are, you know, it's much more in the gray zone, for sure. It's really not black and white.
Would you then say that I was surprised by the low number of conspiracies that you found on the topic of environment. So was it because those on the related to environment or green transition or whatever you want to call it were because they were ambiguous, or you actually did not find them?
No, we didn't find almost at all. So again, it's not because people were not, you know, it's just the things that were brought up by people. So it didn't seem that they brought up that concern and didn't link it to any conspiracy talk. Might it be supporting or challenging? Yeah, we were also surprised, but in this data, no, it didn't come up. Yeah. Surprise. Yeah, there were some surprises like that. Yeah, very little about that. Yeah.
Any more questions?
It's expanding on the code of relationships you referenced before.
Yes.
It was mostly used in referencing. So
Yes.
it was, okay, this person in my life that I know, or a random person. Did you go a bit deeper into how conspiracy thoughts affects personal relationships? Or maybe are you planning to? Because for me, this is like the most interesting part of how this kind of discourse can influence interpersonal relationships.
Yeah, we would like to, because as I said, this was a really interesting point and maybe something that we didn't expect to find, and something that would deserve to be analyzed closer. So I say we have part of the article that is about that, but it would deserve to be like digged in, because I think it's something more tangible. And we were surprised to see like how emotional actually some of his interviewees were, describing, you know, the loss of relationships in their life with siblings and friends, that they said we cannot be friends anymore because of that.
That's quite extreme.
Yes.
It's super important.
Yeah, because I think you probably remember at the time of COVID when there were like discussion that, you know, when people were starting to talk about the vaccine, and there were actually families that were like started to fight, and people didn't want to meet each other after, because they understood that their worldview was so different that they couldn't accept the views from the other. So it did have like a tangible impact. So it's not just about, you know, what's happening online in some obscure corner of the internet, but it can really impact people's life, whether they want it or not. So I think, yeah, it's quite a powerful finding in a way that, and it was actually a lot of the content was very personal and emotional, that you could feel the people's pain as well.
Okay, any more questions, comments? If not, I would like to thank you. Thank you for the interesting lecture. Thank you for the interesting debate. And I would just like to announce the next lecture, which will be next month on the 16th of April, given by our fellow Selenia on red pill women. So we will continue in a similar direction.
So the gender aspect will be covered.
Exactly. Now I would like to invite everyone here with us in person for some coffee and cookies. Thank everyone that was on Zoom, and see you in April.
Thank you, everybody.